Today on the Growing Guelph Podcast, I'm joined by Ann Day and Terrie Jarvis, two local Rotarians doing meaningful work to strengthen connection and collaboration across Guelph and Wellington County. We talk about their own paths into community service, the role of Rotary in projects like Ribfest, Tour de Guelph, and Community Connections, and Terrie's recent recognition as a YMCA Woman of Distinction. I enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. It's just in time for Ribfest next week. Thanks for putting up with some of the delays on this podcast. I have more episodes recorded and more coming out. Might continue to be a bit of a slow release, but stay subscribed, stay listening, and stay being part of Growing Guelph. And now to my conversation with Ann Day and Terrie Jarvis. Today on the Growing Guelph Podcast, I'm joined by Ann Day and Terrie Jarvis. And Terrie, thank you so much for joining me. We are primarily here to talk about the Guelph Rotary Club, but I know both of you are involved in a lot of different things, so I thought maybe some of the first things that we could kind of just introduce yourselves and maybe just speak to a little bit about what brought you here and what sorts of things you're involved in Guelph. Ann, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure. I joined the Rotary Club of Guelph Trillium because there's actually 5 clubs in Guelph. So I joined Guelph Trillium 8 years ago. It was part of my retirement strategy. I hadn't actually retired yet, but I knew that I'd need to do something or I'd go nuts.
That's nice that you had that, like, a real strategy. Some people don't do. Some people just jump into retirement, like, off the deep end and find themselves, like, with far too much time. And
yeah, exactly.
So you knew that you had to fill up your schedule?
And I'd been involved in Rotary. I used to live in Oakville. And I'd been involved in Rotary there, more at the receiving end. I got the grants. I was working for nonprofits, and I would get grants from Rotary. And I actually won a couple of awards from them. So I knew what Rotary was. So I just thought, yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
Very cool. Terrie?
Well, in my case, 13 years ago, we moved to Guelph, and it was a new city for us. My husband and I had been living and working in Munich, Germany for the previous 11 years. With an international company, and then we retired and came to Guelph, so it was a new community. We were newly retired, and I wanted to volunteer and also meet nice, like-minded people in the community. And so the perfect opportunity was to join one of the Rotary clubs. We're actually in 2 separate Rotary clubs, but the clubs do collaborate quite well together. And for me, it's been perfect. It opened up a whole new world of meeting very interesting people that I don't think I would have met otherwise. And also the opportunities to just simply volunteer.
So I am admittedly very ignorant of what Rotary is. Like, I'm aware of the club as a concept. I think I'm aware of the logo, but I have a lot of questions just like to kick things off in terms of, like, what do either of you know something about the history, the foundations of Rotary? How did it come together? What does the name Rotary mean? And it's okay if you don't have the full answers to these, but I'm just curious.
I can speak to that a little bit. It's the Rotary is an international organization of over 1 million members and something like 40,000 clubs around the world. It started about 120 years ago in Chicago when 4 young business people who were just wanting to get ahead in the world were networking with each other, and the name Rotary came about because they used to rotate in whose office they met. And they actually, just getting together, decided their very first project that they worked on was not purely for humanitarian reasons. They in Chicago, women would come and do most of the shopping, but not stay for too long because there were no downtown toilets for them. So they built toilets, and that caused the women to come downtown and stay longer and go out for tea and shop, and that began their life in doing actually what became humanitarian projects. But within a few years, Rotary had grown across the United States and into Canada and internationally. And so the whole organization is built on one simple slogan around the world: service above self. So it's volunteers working in their communities and on international projects to improve the world. That's it.
That's interesting. And I guess because it doesn't have like a religious foundation. It doesn't have like a lot of clubs and things that are, do a lot of good in the world, but they can come with some baggage. And it doesn't sound like Rotary would really be held down.
There's no political agenda, no religious agenda.
So can anyone start a Rotary Club? Or is there like a petition to like you get in touch with
There's a process to starting a club, and you have to have a certain number of members to establish it. So the Guelph Club, which Terrie's part of, is the oldest one in Guelph.
Okay. Do either of you know why Guelph had so many additional clubs spinning out? Is it just like a geographical region, like sort of reason?
The club that I currently belong to was formed in Guelph in 1920, and about 50 or 60 years later, it was had grown so big to over 200 members, and then you couldn't find a meeting place that was big enough, and people didn't get to know each other. So the first of the clubs spun off to be a smaller club, and that procedure happened again and again. So there are four within the city of Guelph. There are 4 adult clubs, and there's also a Rotaract club, which is university students at Guelph.
Oh, cool. So it sounds like there's a built-in mechanism to keep the club at a reasonable size that the members still feel like their individuals are having impacts, and that probably keeps down some of the political and like those sorts of things, because any individual club, if it gets too big, it sort of splinters off, and then there's a little bit less less power in that way.
Yes.
I know with our club we have nearly 60 members, and we're sort of saying not sure we want to go beyond the 60 members, because that becomes harder to manage and make sure everyone feels they're included. So
yeah, that sounds like kind of the sweet spot of more than that, and it's too many people, and less than that, then you might have trouble getting people out to members and get out to meetings and getting members involved in specific activities and that. But if you have 60 people that are looking to already be involved, then you can get a lot done.
Yes.
Did you belong to Rotary in Oakville too?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I worked for a couple of social service agencies that gave us money. So we would ask for a certain amount for any program that we were doing, and they would give us money and so forth.
Oh, cool. And Terrie, you said you lived in Germany. Were you involved in any Rotary in Germany?
No, I only joined Rotary after retirement. I could never fit it into lifestyle. And, so I joined with a very specific reason, that I wanted to meet people, and I thought that in 2 or 3 years I would have met everybody I wanted to, and I'd be out of Rotary, and here I am 13 years later still very involved, because you make friends and there's always a new project to work on.
Yeah, and it must be addicting to that, there's something addicting about that, giving back. It's almost like you get all the fun of the good parts of a career of working, of tackling new projects, but you're doing it by choice, and you're getting to get involved just as much as you want to, and give as much as you want. And if there's weeks or days or months that you have less to give, then whatever, then you can.
It's perfect.
Well, we talked about this a little bit, but we didn't really answer this question. So can each of you take us back to the beginning in terms of what pulled you into community service and then eventually Rotary? And it sounds like you had a career in nonprofit and that beforehand. So yeah, walk us through that.
Most of my career has been working in nonprofits, or I worked for the government for 4 years and then I escaped. But it was
what were you working for in the government?
I was working at the Women's Directorate. My whole career has been focused on women. And so I was working at the Women's Director. And actually, it was fun there. I mean, I got to design programs that would get women into the skilled trades and so forth. But the bureaucracy gets to you after a while.
Yeah.
And you just think, no.
Some people thrive in that kind of environment, and some people...
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I was too entrepreneurial. What do you mean I can't do that?
Yeah.
And then I started my own business, and I started Company of Women. And so, again, it was focusing on bringing people together. There's a lot of synergy between what I was doing there and what I'm doing now, because I used to say to the women who owned their own business that it doesn't matter what business you're in, the issues are the same. And it's the same with bringing the nonprofits together. The issues are the same. They may be facing different challenges. They may be dealing with different people and different issues, but the challenges they face are the same. And so coming together makes sense.
What was your business?
Well, I had two. I had one called Community Connections. You may see the link up. And then the other one was Company of Women, which I did for 20 years. So.
Oh, cool. So it sounds like maybe even before your government work, like getting involved, community building, like that's just something that's...
Yeah.
Do you know where it came from? Like, did you grow up in a household that encouraged, or did you kind of see that behavior modeled in parents or others?
My father was very much, he was born on the wrong side of the tracks, if you like. He had to drop out of school to help support his family, and he was always big on giving back, and he ended up being a very successful businessman. And he had this saying, sense of balance, and that was that if you were doing well, you needed to bring up the scales of justice to help others. And that's what I grew up with. So, yeah, he was a big influence.
Yeah, it's a powerful foundation to have. And I think sometimes people who, if they kind of grow up with less, they'll never take it for granted. And they'll, it can really instill in them that mindset of not everyone has. And if people have, like, not everyone, but if they grow up in privilege, they just don't even, they can be ignorant because they just don't even know, like you used the expression, the other side of the tracks, like they don't even know what life is like for some people.
Well, that's right.
And it can be difficult to have that empathy when you're not even aware of it.
I remember when he died, I found out he'd given loans to so many different people starting businesses. I used to joke he was a dragon before there was a dragon's den. And that was him. He was very generous.
Yeah. And Terrie, what about you? Do you know, can you speak to some of your, what kind of pulled you into community service? And, what was it about Rotary that stood out to you? And were you someone who was mindful and kind of interested in that sort of giving back even before you joined?
I grew up in South Africa where there were plenty of needs in the community, and grew up in a family that was very kind and giving and helpful to others. But I'll pick up on one word that Anne used about being entrepreneurial, and that is one of the things that also drew me to Rotary, that they do so many different things. And when I joined, it wasn't on my retirement bucket list to start a charity, but when a need arose, and I was just in the right place at the right time to do something about it, it turned into a charity. And so I would never have imagined that in my retirement I would have the opportunity to become the entrepreneur I always wanted to be.
It's interesting. I guess there's some of the freedoms that retirement can give in terms of, if you're lucky to still have health and energy, then you can find yourself just eager to point that wisdom and energy and time at things in the world. And if you're someone who wants to make the world a better place, then that's very cool. I guess thank you to both of you for taking the time to join me today and to kind of share some of your stories there. Is there something about Guelph and the Wellington County that for both of you makes you want to keep investing your time and energy here? And Terrie, I'm interested to hear from you about, because it sounded like your husband had retired from his job in Germany. What was it about Guelph that, because do you have any familiarity with the city? It sounds like you didn't, right?
Our younger daughter had gone to university here.
Ah, okay.
And actually, before we lived in Germany, we had also lived in Oakville, and Anne and I discovered only recently that we had lived blocks from each other, but never met in those days. We met here through Rotary, but our younger daughter went to university here, and on each home trip we would visit Guelph, and we thought it was just a really great place and a super place to settle. One daughter had moved to Calgary, one was living in Guelph, who has since moved to Halifax, so we're right in the middle. But I love Guelph. I really love Guelph. Something about it just speaks to us, and we feel a part of this community.
Yeah, I can relate to. I came to Guelph for school, and even though after school I moved away for a couple of years and lived in Toronto, even when I moved away, I had thought to myself, like, I'd like to go back to Guelph, and it was a place that I could put down roots. And like, I'm from the Niagara region, but something about Guelph and coming here and going to school, and then, you know, the years after school, learning more about the city, exploring the city, there's just something compelling about this place. And yeah,
I agree. Yeah, very much.
And what about?
Well, because I actually live in Puslinch, which is south of Guelph, and we moved here. I didn't know this. Note to self: always ask what your husband's dreams are. But he wanted to buy a farm, and so we bought a farm, and we have 85 acres, so it's not even a small farm.
That's a decent chunk of land.
It's a chunk of land, and we came to, and it's an old house. It's 1850.
Oh, cool.
And we're antique collectors, so this was sort of, our furniture will even fit in here. So, and I really love being in Puslinch. I didn't at first, I'll be honest. I mean, I'm a city gal.
Yeah. Was it isolating at first?
Yeah, it is. And I didn't know anyone. And that's actually one of the reasons I got involved with the Pioneer, was if you can sort of find out what's happening in the community when you're doing the local newspaper.
It's interesting how, depending on where people grew up, living rurally or even living in Guelph can, like for people who grew up in cities, it can feel like, oh, like, where is everyone? There's this like isolating, like, scariness. And I kind of get that to a sense. Like, I grew up in the suburbs, but I'm used to there being people around. And especially when I lived in Toronto, there's something reassuring about having people around. Like, even if it's late at night, like, there's people out on the street. There's people, like, even in a scary moment, if there's like an alarming individual, like, there's other people that are there, and there's this like safety of a connection. But then other people, like, I worked in agriculture, and I met and talked to a lot of people who grew up on farms, and they couldn't even imagine having a neighbor and you can see their house. Like, they don't want to be anywhere near their neighbors. They appreciate a neighbor you can go to like their house and visit, but they want like that they want their own place and their own isolation. So I guess you've had to kind of learn. Like, do you appreciate it now?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, especially when you get up in the morning, you hear the birds and that sort of thing, and
that's
just
nice.
The nature. Yeah, it's
and
nice.
Where did you grow up?
Well, I actually grew up in Edinburgh.
Oh, okay.
I'm Scottish. And then when I was 14, we moved to London. And I met my husband when I was 16, so there you go.
That's fun. And then when did you come to London, England, I assume, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we came to Canada in 1975.
Okay. And then was that Oakville primarily that you went to?
Yeah, well, we started in Toronto, and then we bought a house in Oakville, so.
I also lived in Oakville for 2 years. Well, my wife went back to school there, and I liked Oakville. I feel like I probably didn't connect and like explore the city as much as I should have. It was difficult at the time. I was working in like Mississauga, but I did like Oakville a lot. It's very, it feels like it kind of wants to be like a sleepy little quiet, like, I didn't know this until I'd lived there, but Oakville doesn't allow billboards. And it's one of those things that you really appreciate when you're there, where you're like, oh, this place is like quite nice. And like, especially from someone who grew up in Niagara Falls, who so like feels like the city of billboards and like advertisements. And yeah, Oakville has some charming qualities to it, but it maybe it's just the proximity to Toronto or something, but it didn't feel like it has quite the same personality that Guelph does. And there's something about Guelph just being like just outside the boundaries of the GTA, that it has its own feel of a city unto itself, and it's not just a suburb of Toronto. You're kind of just on the edge of like farmland, and it's like the farm, agriculture capital in a lot of ways of Ontario, at least. Yeah, there's something about like Guelph's proximity. Maybe it's the fact that it was such a planned, intentional city, and it wasn't a city that just grew up by being like a trading post or something like that. Like they set out to particularly put Guelph where it is for a number of reasons, but I don't know. I in future episodes, I am interested in sitting down and talking to like historians of Guelph to really, as you can imagine, the nature of Guelph comes up a lot in this podcast, and like I'm always fascinated to know like how the city got the qualities that we associate with it. Like how far back does that go? What led to it? Like, so if anyone's listening and they have some insight into that, or they know someone who does, let me know. So, and you've worn a lot of different community hats, an advocate for women entrepreneurs. You're the editor of the Puslunch Pioneer. You're a farm owner, Rotarian. Rotarian, is that how you pronounce that? Rotarian. Yeah. And you're now the host of Guelph's Good News Space. Do you see a common thread running through all of that work?
It's all about connecting people.
Yeah.
It's bringing people together, whether it's through the word or through bringing people together through meetings and events, and making a difference. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest key piece, is making a difference.
So you had brought this up, and I had just mentioned it, but maybe talk a little bit about the Puslunch Pioneer.
Yeah, we're celebrating next week our 50th anniversary.
Congrats.
And it's all produced by volunteers, which is amazing, really. And the person that does the layout is in her late 70s. I just hand it to her. I mean, she's amazing.
So yeah, it's a printed newsletter?
It's a printed newsletter, yeah. And it's actually the next issue is 40 pages. Oh, and it's white glossy paper. It looks like a magazine. And we do this every month for 10 months of the year. So I get next month off.
There's nothing like publishing to just... It's like as soon as you get one issue done...
Yeah, you're on the next
one.
one.
It's like, okay, now on to the next one, right?
Well, it is.
And like that'll keep you busy in terms of...
Oh, it does. It does.
So what's your...
I used to work with... I used to be the editor of Today's Parent magazine.
Oh, cool.
We worked 6 months ahead of time. So
that's a nice buffer.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it's still, in the middle of the summer, you're doing a winter shoot.
Oh, yeah. And if you have 6 months buffer, it just means that like things can't actually be delayed that much, right? You're just having to push forward. So what exactly do you do with the Puslunch Pioneer? You're the editor,
I'm the
right?
editor, so all the articles come through me, and if we don't get enough articles, I write them. So you can usually tell when you look at the paper, if there's a lot by Ann Day, you know that we didn't get many submissions.
Yeah.
But we do. We've got some regular writers, and they're really good. I mean...
And does it have an online component as well?
We have a website, and we send it out electronically to about 1,000 people. But the actual paper itself is delivered to every household in Puslunch. That's about 3,300.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I do sometimes. When I moved back to Guelph, the Mercury had already closed, and when I was a student, I never subscribed to the newspaper. But I sometimes am sad about the lack of like a real daily newspaper in Guelph. I mean, one of my reasons to start this podcast was to try to create something that pulls people back to being focused on the local level, the local events, the local people that are actually here, because it's really easy with social media and online things for the conversation between people to just get pulled to this federal, provincial, and then it just becomes a mess of like, who you're talking to online, like you don't know their stake in it. Are they Canadian? Are they a bot from overseas? Like, are they in AI? Like, and I think it just has a way of making us feel powerless. but focusing on the local, focusing on what's actually happening can just bring people together and get you out of your house too, which I think since the pandemic is something that's important for us to focus on because
well, there's so much negative news these days, so it's good to
Yeah.
sort of focus on stuff
And that's
that
what
can make a difference.
Exactly. And it seems like news gets more negative the more high level, like it's hard not for the news to be negative if you're like, let's look at what's happening in the world today. Oh, it's, negative climate change news, wars that are happening. And like that makes it to the tops of the headlines because they're sensational. They grab your attention. But when you do focus on local stories, sure, you can look at like local crimes and stuff like that. But like for the most part, the overwhelming amount of local stories that I see are people who care about their community, people doing cool work, people like, these are all reasons why I wanted to start this podcast and sit down with people like both of you, because there's so many people who are doing cool things out there, doing good work that deserve some focus and deserve some time. And yeah, I just think that sometimes there was something to be said about people starting their day with a local newspaper that had the stories of the world, but like had a big focus on their community, their neighbors, like the good, the bad, and like what everyone was brought together by. And I don't think our communities are improved by the lack of that, right? But I don't know how to solve the problems of local journalism. Like your paper is one that relies on a lot of volunteers and things like that, probably because, there's a whole lot of issues with like local journalism and the problems of like advertising dollars have dried up. Like,
Well,
do you guys?
and that's how we pay for the paper.
Yes.
That's why
That's how it's able to happen at all, right?
The advertisers pay for the production of the paper. And actually, it's interesting. I've been doing sort of a little special handout that goes in the paper this time about what happened when it first started. And, they were using a Gestetner machine to print the paper and one of those ones. And then they would collate and each person had their own page and they'd sort of jockey up to do their page and so forth. Well, I mean, now, because of COVID, actually, we had to have it collated by the printers, which is good in some ways, but in other ways, it was another way to bring the people together because they would come and collate it together. But, yeah.
Yeah, these little things that we've lost that, I mean, we've gained other things, right? Like we have podcasts, which are really just radio with like a delay but social media and things like that, like a lot of interesting things, but some things that we've lost that it's too bad, but yeah, thanks for keeping print media alive in that way. Terrie, first off, congratulations on being named a YMCA Woman of Distinction. When you heard about that honor, what did it mean to you, and what part of your community work do you hope it shines a light on? And then, and I also want to ask you, or note that you were a Woman of Distinction 5 years ago. So I wanted to kind of ask you about, like, looking back, what did that honor mean to you? But yeah, first off, congrats, Terrie.
Well, thank you very much. Well, my first reaction was surprise, because when you're trying to live by the slogan of service above self, you're not doing it for awards or recognition. And when I was approached by the nominator saying, I have to get permission before I put this in, I said, oh, I'm really not a limelight sort of person. I'm just doing what I do. And she spoke to me a bit more, and then she hit my soft spot. She said, if this goes through, it would really shine a light on our program. So that was my soft spot.
That's how you get to someone who's really selfless, is you have to say, like, it'll help the things that you care about and the things that you're working towards. It's like, okay.
Exactly what it was. A couple of weeks ago, when they had a really beautiful event that they held at the ICC to recognize the 5 women receiving this award, I was able to shine the light on the children's food program that I had through Rotary helped to establish, and we had got this program going from nothing up to feeding 500 local children every week. and then handed it over to the Children's Foundation of Guelph. And so that was where I was able to shine the light to say this need is still there, it's still growing. Please support it, continue Guelph supporting the children in our community. So that was what meant a lot to me.
That's very cool. And on an early episode of this podcast, I think over a year and a half ago or so, I spoke to Amanda, who works for the Children's Foundation. Yes. And I know we talked a lot about feeding kids and stuff like that. Sorry, some of the details of that conversation have lost me, but I think that's a conversation for listeners to go back and listen to if they're interested in that. I am going to talk to you more about Food4Kids. And do you want to speak to a little bit about what it had meant to you? And
well, of course, I received it in 2020, which was the year of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I must admit it was sort of, there's no party. But they didn't do a lot. I think for me it was because I was retiring around that time. It felt like recognition of all the work I'd done with women, different women. I mean, not just entrepreneurs, teen mums, women who were in abusive relationships, all the different women that I had worked with. And it meant a lot. It sort of felt like, okay, somebody's noticed.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, sorry to hear that it was like so many things from that year and year after and that were impacted by COVID. But it's good that the YMCA does that. I guess I need to look more into that program. Or is it specifically the YMCA of Guelph? Or
It's national. It's nationwide.
Oh, wow. Very cool. So, Terrie, to go back to the Food4Kids, that grew out of a very specific gap, children not having reliable food access on weekends and holidays. What did you learn from building that program about the needs that can be hidden in a community like ours?
Well, when we first heard about it, it was just at a regular weekly Rotary Club meeting. The speaker that week told us about this need in our community of children going hungry. Honestly, I think most of us in the room, myself included, were of a mind to say, in Guelph? What about all those breakfast programs? What about the food banks and so on? And we learned that this is a very, quite a distinct big problem. About 5% of our own community in Guelph is severely food insecure, not moderately, severely food insecure, where they really don't know where their next meal is coming from at home.
Wow.
And when we heard about this, our first thought was that let's go out and check. We're all retired business people, or mostly at Rotary. Let's go out and check that this need exists in our community. It was quite hard to believe. Well, it didn't take long to have confirmation from schools and other organizations that it is a big problem. And when we sized the problem, it looked as though there could be as many as 500 children in Guelph. This is only elementary schools, about 500 children going home and not knowing what they were going to get to eat at the weekend. So our first thought was, well, let's go and find whoever in the community is working on this, and we'll get Rotary behind them and help them. Well, 3 months later, our discovery was that nobody in Guelph was addressing this weekend food shortage, so it became a situation of, well, somebody's got to do something about it, and it ended up being us. So we started small, working with the school board. They highlighted 3 elementary schools and identified 43 children across those 3 schools, spoke to the parents and said, here's a pilot program. Would you be interested if your children get a bag of food to take home from school on a Friday? And that's what we started with. And the pilot program was an amazing success, so it just rolled forward. Of course, during COVID, that was 2018, during COVID, the problem was, first of all, that kids weren't going to school. Mm-hmm. So we had to pivot immediately to sending grocery gift cards to the families who were on our list. But we kept getting new names added to the list, and by the time we got back after COVID, we'd gone from 200 children to over 400 children in our program. And then when it reached 500 and we were 6 years into the program, it was always part of our business plan that Rotary starts things, gets it going, and we had a very well-oiled machine running. But it was hard. We had to raise $500,000 a year to fund this, to buy the food, and to get it out to the schools. And we were then at 32 out of the 39 elementary schools in Guelph. So that meant all the volunteers needed to drive, to pack, to purchase. And so we reached the point that it was time to hand it over. And it's nice that you mentioned Amanda from the Children's Foundation. She also received a Woman of Distinction award 2 weeks ago for her role. So I got to see her then as well, and of course work with her and support her as much as I can. But we handed over our program to the perfect partner, because the Children's Foundation of Guelph had for over 20 years been coordinating the in-school food programs. But they didn't do weekends or holidays. We did weekends and holidays, so it was a perfect fit. When they took over the program, it allowed them to feed children in need year-round. So it's been perfect, and that merger happened almost 2 years ago, and it's been absolutely fantastic. They're doing a great job with it, and are now up to 560 children a week. But we've had to start a waiting list again for the program, because it takes a lot of money to run this. So if anybody's listening, we had to change the name of the program from Food4Kids to Keep Kids Fed. And we've got the two programs, Keep Kids Fed at School, which is their old program, and now Keep Kids Fed at Home, which is the weekend and holiday program.
Congrats on recognizing that as an issue, and then also seeing that, because like the way you spoke about it, it wasn't like, oh, we saw this problem and we decided to take it on. Like, it was almost as if we recognized this problem, and then of course we had to take it on. Like, that's kind of the words that you used, and it speaks to your like what drives and motivates you, in that it wasn't really an option once you became aware of it. Like, it sounds like it just became like a drive. I mean, I learned so much about just how widespread and pervasive the food insecurity can be in our community during my time working at the Salvation Army here in Guelph at the Family Services location. They give out free food there 4 days a week, and you learn a lot about people, and you connect with the people that come into that, and through that work, and then through just being aware and seeing on social media how many people are relying on food banks, and it just is, it, like you kind of said, it's easy to take for granted, especially those of us that are privileged enough to be educated and gainfully employed and things like that, where we can complain about food being expensive and going out to eat keeps going up in price, and deciding what to eat, and like all of that, trying to make healthy choices, sure, but there's this underlying assumption that there's going to be food in the refrigerator, the pantry is going to have food, and if it doesn't, it's not a question of if we can, it's a question of fitting it into our busy lives. But that's not true of everyone, and
Correct.
There's a lot of people in our community where they're having to make those choices of, paying the bill, paying the credit card bill versus being able to get food and being able to, like, it's hard to see it sometimes, because one is that people have, there's a lot of shame wrapped up in it. It's good that, like, just speaking about it, because I think that lets people know, it lets like the kids know in those situations that like it's not something you should be ashamed of. Like, then the more people speak about it, the more there's headlines written about it, and that the more people will kind of realize like, oh, right, like there isn't an inherent shame built into this. Like, it's not a moral judgment on people. It's a fact of the world, a fact of inflation, a fact of like people's jobs being more and more insecure. Like, and that's only going to probably get worse until we're able to, get to perhaps like a universal basic income or just some sort of safety net. It doesn't look like AI is slowing down. It doesn't look like these capitalist forces are going to stop. Like, more and more people are kind of losing their ability to keep their families fed, to keep like food just on their dinner tables. And yeah, the work that you're doing at organizations like that are really going to help. I think the kids in the situations, but also just like our whole society try to come together and
There's
solve
something about
these.
doing hands-on stuff. We do a lot of hands-on stuff at our club, and so we'll collect eggs and cheese for Chalmers, and we'll do different things for the food bank, and then hygiene products is another one to get those to people. So you feel you're making a bit of a difference. I mean,
yes, you're right. Like, I mean, when I was working at the Salvation Army, it was very interesting in that I was making less money than I had made in years and years and years of my career, but the work itself was so rewarding. Like, I would drive a van and I would go to there were scheduled pickups at Costco and at other grocery stores, and it was hard work, like hauling hundreds, thousands of pounds of food, but it never felt like it was never hard to do, because it wasn't hard work in service of bosses to make them money or for shareholders to make their money. It was like, if I save this food and I can get it back to our fridges and our freezers, then people will have something to eat. And like, just as a motivating force, that was, I don't know, it was just, it's a completely different kind of motivation than being motivated by money and things like that. And yeah, I'd encourage, if people are listening, to try helping out like, there's no shortage of places that need your help. So if you go looking for places to spend your time to put it towards the community, you'll find it. And if you've never done that, like, give it a try, because it's so rewarding in a way that a lot of like corporate work and traditional work just can't hold a candle to.
I think there are a lot of people like yourself, Jordan, who are actually Rotarians at heart, who just don't have a membership yet.
She says yet.
but that's exactly what it is. It's simply helping others, and it's not for profit. It's not for fame. It's just to make the world a better place, and that is deeply satisfying and gratifying.
Well, I can't think of a better pitch for our listeners and even to myself to stay involved and because I haven't been I no longer work at the Salvation Army, but I do miss that element of it, like, for sure. And there's so many different ways to get involved, and in some of the things that you kind of both had talked to about the Rotary, it seems like there's this real foundation of making a real effort of making sensible choices that you're like, you have the care and you have the attention, but like, let's make the right choice. Let's make sure what does the data tell us, like, how to move forward to serve people with the best need. Like, I've talked to a lot of charities on this podcast, and I used to work in some nonprofits, and a lot of nonprofits are driven, like, they let their emotions kind of steer them. And that can be a powerful, like, motivating force to get things done, but it doesn't always lead to the most sensible decisions of like how to spend your time to get the greatest done, like the greatest good amount of good done in the world. But it sounds like Rotary does have that. Would you both kind of agree with that?
One of the aspects that I think is very nice, and it's not just Rotary, the Lions Club and Optimist Club, but do similar sort of things. But when you are doing it with other people who share the same sort of values, you can get so much more done than you can on your own.
Yeah.
And that is actually the value of joining an organization. You can continue to volunteer and help, but when you join forces, amazing things start happening, and it's all about the connections and people who know other people, when you can get something done that you could not on your own.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like in a nutshell, like the power of humanity in so many ways. And, it's astounding when that power is put towards, building great things and stuff like that. And, obviously the corporations and like things like that in the world can get a lot of things done, but like that's not the only way to get things done. And just like-minded people in unifying groups like this, it sounds like, or it's obvious that we're not, despite what some like capitalists might like to phrase things, like we're not solely motivated by acquiring more and capital and like greed and things like that. Some people, that's a primary motivation for them, but I don't think that speaks to all of us. And there's so much goodwill out there of people who just want to connect and share their talents.
And it's not just donating money, it's donating your time.
Yeah.
And sharing your expertise with other people so they can get ahead too.
Yeah, and there's so many, like, everyone throughout their life acquires skills and talents, and, even if it's just they're, like, really good at gardening, like, you can take those skills and you can apply them into nonprofits of the world, and you can teach those skills, and, there's no shortage of ways to contribute and to give.
But if I may, having just mentioned, it's not about making money, but what does take money to do a lot of what we do, and this is where also Rotary does a number of significant fundraising events for the enjoyment of the community, but also to raise the funds that are needed to run the programs as well.
Yeah, well, I know you're thinking about Ribfest because that's the biggest one that our club does. And,
that's probably where I'm most familiar with seeing Rotary as just a name out there is just at Ribfest. But
yeah, it's a lot of work. It's
I can imagine.
a 3-day event, and it's, over 200 volunteers. And I remember I wasn't involved last year, but the year before it was 40,000 people that came through the gates.
think last year was the first time I actually went to Guelph Ribfest, and I was blown away of how much there was there.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Like, I had been to other Ribfests where it's like there's the ribs and then like maybe some vendors and that, but like the Guelph Ribfest was like a full carnival.
Yeah.
And there were rides, and there were so many, like, not just kids, like teenagers out. It seemed like the most happening places if you were like 14 or 15, there was like 500 of them just having the Friday night or
There's
Saturday
the
night
music,
of their
and
life.
then on the Friday we have storytelling for the younger children.
That's cool.
And so on. Yeah, no, it's big deal. And actually, one of the things we're doing to help charities is if they want to volunteer for us, because that's the biggest challenge. If they have a team of 8 people and they do a 3-hour shift clearing up, they get $300. So
that's a good motivator.
Yeah.
There are times on this podcast and in this conversation where it's easy to be negative about like some of the more greedy elements of capitalism and people acquiring wealth. That said, people do a lot of good with the money that they are able to acquire in their, personal private businesses or their corporations. And if you're able to direct some of that back to charities that you want to support and things like that, like, I think that's a great use of.
Yeah, we use the money to, we don't use the money raised one year. We save it till the next year because we're always worried we're going to have a rain fest where the turnout is low and so forth. So we don't want to guarantee money that we haven't yet collected. But we spend the money, we allocate funds to the different charities. I think we gave money to 37 charities this year. So, and usually for equipment and fridges and whatever, things that are concrete. So
at the Ribfest, is it does like a portion of all the food sales go to the charity, or is it?
The ribbers donate some of it, but all the other vendors are paying a fee, so that's part of the fundraising.
Right.
And donations at the gate.
And donations at the gate.
Good to know.
There are some very significant events that are run by the different Rotary clubs. At my club, for 30 years, we do the sparkles in the park, the Christmas lights at Riverside Park.
Oh, yeah.
And when cars drive through there, make a donation that is fundraising towards charitable causes. And one of the other clubs for over 30 years does the annual duck race on the Speed River, and they now hold it on the Sunday of Ribfest and raise a ton of money also that goes back into the community. Another club, two other clubs supporting Tour de Guelph for the Guelph General Hospital. So
I've just started noticing some of the lawn signs popping up for the Tour de Guelph.
Yeah, that's at the end of June.
So that's all Rotarians making those things happen, which is really quite amazing.
I feel like once you get involved with the Rotary Club, you must start realizing just how big of an impact the relatively few members like actually have. Like, and this is the case of so many things where like the people who are really doing a lot of incredible work, like there's a lot of those people in Guelph, but it's kind of a smaller pool than you might think in terms of like, not to diminish the amount of people that are involved in the good work, but just that you kind of start to appreciate that like, oh, the Rotary, you know, the several thousand people who are involved in Rotary clubs across Guelph, they have such a big impact on the city as a whole, and the entire city benefits from all of their efforts in planning and organizing and putting things together.
Yeah, I think one of our challenges is getting people to know that it's Rotary that's putting this on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the hard thing too. I mean, we've kind of talked about it in this conversation, in that like often the clubs probably attract the people who don't want to be the spotlight, and it must make it a challenge to be like, no, but like people should know, because then they'll know where to donate to, and it does help. I mean, nonprofits have this as an issue in general, where like they want to do the work, and they can sometimes feel like embarrassed to be asking for money to get even though like that money is what gets the work done and it enables it, and it becomes like it kind of becomes a whole thing where like and I say this as someone who's worked in marketing and communications and like some fundraising for nonprofits, where it's like it can be like almost a challenge of getting people who don't always have that inclination to say, look at me, look how great I am, look what I've done, I deserve more money to do this even more.
Well, you get people that join boards for different reasons.
Yeah,
I've had my share of board members that have got their MBA, and you know, they think they're the bee's knees, is what my father would say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's skills that they can bring to the table in terms of that, but you're right, like it is tricky when people want to, like, I don't know, just nonprofit work is very different. When I worked at a nonprofit, and I can speak to it directly, I worked for the Ontario chapter of agriculture in the classroom, so nonprofit dedicated to bringing food and agriculture education to Ontario schools. And something that I really appreciated about it was that when you were working with other companies and you're connecting, there's no competition. Like, you're friends with everyone. If anything, the hardest thing is like having to selectively sort of say no, because everyone wants to partner and connect and do cool projects with each other. But there's, you know, your biggest resource becomes like you and your rest of your staff's like time and ability to not say yes to too many things and spread yourself too thin. But it's such a welcome comparison than when you work in like the corporate world and everything becomes a competition. Like, you're all chasing the same customers' dollars, and it's all about like elbowing them out. And like at the nonprofit world, there is a little bit of that competition for people's donations, but there's also just a feeling of like, let's all work together. And
we're in this together.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's just not how corporations often think. So I did appreciate that. And I missed that. Like when I left that nonprofit, there's just, there's something to be said about working with people who are driven by the goals and the impacts that you're able to make, and not just the bottom line of the business. Can you talk to our listeners a little bit about what the Community Connections project is, what sparked it, what happens in the room, and what you hope changes because these organizations are meeting each other?
We started it because I noticed after every year we give out these grants, and we have maybe 6 of the agencies come for breakfast, and they have to tell us a bit about themselves. And what I noticed was afterwards, they were all chatting, and they were comparing notes, and they were saying, oh, well, we could do that, and so forth. And so you could see that there was some synergy there, and if we created an atmosphere where that could be fostered, that would be great. So we had our first meeting. We worked together, Terrie and I, to do that. Partly because I think we're trying to get them to work together, so we have to show that we can walk the talk too. So we got the other clubs involved, and we had a big breakfast meeting, which was facilitated, and we heard what some of their issues were. And then they were all saying, well, we want to meet again. Actually, they wanted us to sponsor lunch. And so we said, well, how about it's a brown bag lunch. So we did, and we had the next meeting, and that was a smaller number. It was more the smaller agencies. And then the third meeting we had was in April, and we had 48 agencies out to that, and that was really powerful. And we had each of them introduce themselves. And Terrie has great contacts. She found some speakers, and they heard from 3 different people, and then we just let them network. And it was supposed to end at 11:30, and at 12 they were still there. So now we're going to do another one in September.
Oh, cool. And what sorts of organizations are represented? Like, what is it? Yeah, like where do these people?
They're all from all sectors. I mean, yeah. And actually that is what makes it more interesting, because then they hear from someone that's not in their sector, but there's still ways for them to work together.
Yeah.
As a result of it, one organization partnered with another one to write a funding proposal.
Oh, that's cool.
You can talk about the Rotaracts.
Yes, at one of our very first meeting, we also invited members from the University Rotary Club to come, and they do. And every year, that team does an annual gala fundraiser at the university, and they choose a particular charity to be the beneficiary of the several $1,000s that they raise. And when they came to our meeting, they said, we're all students here, we don't really know organizations. So I introduced them to a representative who was present from Wyndham House, the youth shelter organization. And magic happened, and the Rotaractors chose them. And so at their event last March, Wyndham House got all this extra coverage from the students, and the students were volunteering for them as well. It was really wonderful, and we're very happy that a connection like that happened through the meeting that we had arranged. You can't always predict what is going to happen, but we did find that the larger charities that were invited have enough staff and stability and capacity to do networking on their own, and will have their own coffee meetings with their partners in other charities. But the smaller charities who are operating on a thread
and newer charities,
and they don't have the capacity to reach out and to find out. So some of them are absolutely astounded to find that there are other charities or non-profits doing very similar work to themselves, and that they could perhaps be stronger together.
I can relate to that so much, and I kind of just spoke to this about how, like, at so many nonprofits, people are wearing so many hats and they're working well and above their, 40 hours a week. People really dedicating their lives to these things. But it's easy to be siloed in your work and not get to know that, like, or not understand that you're like reinventing the wheel in a lot of cases where other organizations have solved this problem and would be happy to knowledge share, and being able to bridge those sorts of groups together. I mean, in some ways it sounds like the community connections is like a microcosm of, or an echo of, like, what started Rotary in Chicago, and it was the 20s, I think you said, right? That, like, just that it was people getting together and sharing in that original sort of idea, and, like, bringing those connections together and, like, brainstorming.
Well, some of the agencies are starting to look at sharing space. Maybe this
Yeah.
office is available on such and such. Do you want to use it? And so that's starting to happen as well.
That's cool.
But, part of the silo problem is also the funding problem, in that, the ministry funders put certain regulations around who they can serve, and that
Right.
makes it much more difficult as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can, from the nonprofit I worked at, that had a lot of our time was spent jumping through the various governmental hoops that, in order to keep getting certain funding. And, like, I can appreciate as a taxpayer the idea of, like, the government being very careful and considerate about where their money goes, but, like, at the same time, there's there's such thing as like wasting all your time justifying the money that you got from them, and or in that case, like, walls that were put up
Yeah.
that would stop organizations from being able to collaborate because of that maybe well-intentioned bureaucratic rules and stuff that get imposed. So yeah, I mean, my next question was going to be about some of the, like, how one of the big challenges in nonprofit is working in silos. Everyone is doing urgent work, but separately. And yeah, it kind of sounds like.
And burnout.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Like,
Yeah.
when you talk of the lack of funding directly correlates or becomes a lack of resources, a lack of personnel at these organizations. So you have, the same staff trying to do more with less, or less staff trying to accomplish the same things. And, like, it's no wonder that people have less time in their days to network, connect. Like, even just taking the luxury of, like, a couple hours out for lunch, like, that can be a challenge if that means, like, work that's not being done that gets put on other team members. But, like, working in that kind of energy impoverished environment means that you're losing opportunities, right? That, like, I mean, it's almost similar to when people talk about, like there's analogies where it comes to, like, an economic sense, where if you have the resources, like, people talk about it, like, with if you have the resources in the space in your household to stock up, and you can go to Costco, you can get a deal at Costco. You can buy 2 things of toilet paper because you can store that extra toilet paper. And it's a luxury of having a Costco membership and a car and a place to store it. If you're only able to walk to the local corner store and buy your toilet paper a few rolls at a time, you're going to pay more. And you're going to there's an opportunity cost where the person who has more can therefore keep getting more because they're saving money long term. You know what I mean? Like, there's that whole idea, and, like, that's true in the corporate world too, where if your organization is running so threadbare because you're trying to, then, like, you're missing out on the opportunities of connection and kind of giving your employees some time back in their day to get other things done and brainstorm. Like, it's a whole, I understand how it happens to organizations, but it becomes a tricky problem to solve, especially in a world where, like, nonprofits running off of donations, and people don't always have donations, or they have less money to give.
One of the issues that came up at the first meeting was that they don't feel respected for what they do. They think, in terms of, when you work in corporations, you move up the ranks and so forth.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a non-profit, now maybe you don't have the right skills, and they don't feel so valued, which is too bad, because they do have a lot of strengths.
That's
Yeah.
a very important point that came across to me too, that having a career in a non-profit world is very important and very valuable, and I think they appreciated being recognized.
Yeah.
It's such a challenge too, because like the corporate world can always fall back on rewarding people with like the monetary reward, right? Where like, oh, the work's tough and it's miserable, but here's a bonus. And like that does, money is power in that sense, where people can say like, okay, yes, this job has its downsides, but like I can take my family on a vacation, or I can do XYZ. I can give to my charity of choice. Like that is power, but nonprofits often don't have that luxury. They can't give out bonuses. So now it just becomes like, oh, well, the work has to be like speak for itself, or the work has to be the justification or the motivation. And that can work for some people, and sometimes, I don't know, that's tricky. I think sometimes it also means that you end up through the necessity of how it's set up, your employees are people who have the luxury of being able to work those sorts of jobs, and there's not much you can really do about that. I think both of you have either ran or been involved in nonprofits. Like it's just the nature of how that work is, in the same sense that like so many nonprofits like the Rotary Clubs, they thrive and depend on the energy and the time of people who are retired, who have that luxury because they had corporate careers, or they had like partners with corporate careers.
A lot of our
like,
members aren't retired; they're working.
That's good to hear.
We meet at breakfast time, so we meet at 7:30 in the morning. So our meetings end at 8:30, so they can get back to work. I mean, yeah.
That's good, and that's nice that like you're able to, attract that kind of energy. It's an interesting wrinkle of how modern work rewards people. Like in so many situations, the important, difficult work is not the work that can be rewarded with, a high-paying salary or bonuses or things like that. And in a lot of cases, the work that doesn't actually really improve society in any meaningful way does get rewarded, right? Like if you're good at moving money around and investments and things like that, like not to say that's not important, because there is a lot of importance in that, but I think it has like an outsized impact in terms of, or ability for people to be rewarded for that, right? Like our society is not necessarily great at distributing the value of where things are actually, when I say actually, like meaningful impact on people's lives, often has to come from people working out of the goodness of their hearts, and not because it's profitable. And we already kind of talked a little bit about Ribfest, but it's probably one of the most visible ways that people encounter Rotary in Guelph. What do you wish people understood about what's happening behind the ribs, the music, the volunteers, and the family fun?
Takes all year planning.
I worked a little bit in events, and I can say, like, if it's a big, successful event, even if it's just a 2-day, 3-day thing, it does take a full year to plan something like that.
Yeah, it takes a whole year and a whole lot of different people who chair different parts of it.
Yeah.
And
it all comes down to the weather on those days and times.
It really does. Yeah. And finding the right vendors and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also what an amazing event it can be for the benefit of the whole community, and the outcome meaning that there's funds are raised that go back into the community.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a circle. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Apologies if we already said this, but what day is Ribfest this year?
It's the 28th, 29th, and 30th. So it's actually starting on the Friday afternoon
Of August.
Of August. Okay.
And then Saturday is 11 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sunday is 11 till 8. But keeping Riverside clean because people just dump rubbish, and it's.
I wouldn't be surprised though if the Guelph crowds are better than you'd expect in some cases. Like obviously there's going to be kids and people who don't care, but just having in an early episode of this podcast, I spoke to Hillside, and I don't know if either of you like have experiences with Hillside, but
No,
like
my daughter has, but
I'd only gone one time, but I was astounded at like, in some ways, if you took all of the stereotypical, like that crunchy hippie kind of stereotype about Guelph and distilled it down into like an event, that's Hillside. So like Hillside doesn't just have garbages, they have these like stations where there's like 5 different garbages, and all of the food vendors use reusable cutlery and plates that everyone actually uses and takes care of and then carefully sorts at those stations. And then there's like hundreds of volunteer dishwashers who are cleaning all of those things. And like, I don't know, it's just seeing it in action, and like it can only exist because the community cares and like enforces those rules. And I don't know, it's very cool that Hillside's able to do that. But yeah, I can imagine just like any event is going to have to.
Well, yeah, we don't allow dogs unless it's a service dog. Mm-hmm. And that's created some problems for some people. But, you know, you have to think about there's all this food everywhere and kids.
And everyone thinks that their nicely trained dog can handle it. But Ribfest isn't the place to test that theory out, right? That their dog's not going to bolt. And there's carnival rides. Like, I can imagine the insurance alone would stop you from allowing animals. Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of the things, you know, between Ribfest, Tour de Guelph, the Food4Kids or Keep Kids Fed, and Community Connections. It seems like Rotary works at both like the big event level and the quiet relationship building level. What's your invitation to listeners who want to help make Guelph stronger, but they're not sure where to begin?
One is to volunteer at Ribfest. I mean, I think that's a way to get a taste of what we are doing. But the other is if anybody wanted to come, they'd be welcome to come as a guest to our breakfast meetings and check it out.
So I guess I'd have a question, like, how do people know what Rotary Club specifically in Guelph that they should belong to? Like, can anyone in Guelph join any of them, or is it a little bit based off of geography, or is it like...
It depends on your time, to be honest, because, I mean, Terrie's club meets for lunch on a Friday. Another club meets for dinner on a Monday. And then the South Club sort of rotates where they're meeting. So it really depends on what suits your time. And if you went to the district, Rotary District 7080, there is a website which gives you the list of all the clubs in Guelph and a little bio about each one and when they meet, what they do, what their fundraisers are, and so forth, and which charities. Because that's the other, if you're really into one particular charity, that might be a way to support that cause.
Well, while we speak to Rotary, of course there are other wonderful service clubs as well, right. But if it was Rotary, if you just went online and typed in Rotary Guelph, you would reach a local Rotary club, and we work closely together, recognizing that there are where people live, what time they have available, a convenient time for them. So we share information and let anybody who has an interest know what the options are. Sometimes they join a club because they want to be involved with a specific cause.
Right.
You know, my club is also very strong on environmental issues, and if that is your calling, then you're quite likely to end up wanting to be a part of our club. But we share information and resources and volunteers all the time. We volunteer for each other as well.
Oh, cool. So there's a lot of overlap, it sounds like. Like the clubs exist as separate entities and have their separate like meeting times and that, but like there's a lot of connection, knowledge share, and
a lot of collaboration.
Yeah. It's very cool. Well, is there anything that either of you didn't get a chance to speak about that you want to share with the audience, or?
I'm part of a committee. There's where we have representatives from each of the clubs, and we're working on human trafficking, which for Guelph is a big issue.
I've learned a little bit about this.
Yeah.
I'm doing some volunteer work with Victim Services Wellington,
Mm-hmm.
and I know they have a full-time staff member that's dedicated to working with some of the human trafficking. And there's so much about human trafficking that I wasn't aware of until I started doing this volunteering, and just how much wider the scope of the types of crimes that are involved in human trafficking. And just in some ways, I heard someone phrase it that like Guelph's notoriety when it comes to this, it's almost a good thing, because it means like we only know that because there's a light, the fact that there's like a light being shined on it, versus like that's kind of one of the things when it comes to crime stats, right? Is like a crime stat is a crimes that we know about. It's not to say that it's necessarily overly represented, but it just means that there's a lot of attention being paid to it in Guelph. But sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, no, just to say that that's another big issue that our clubs are looking at.
Yeah.
And we put on we have speaker engagements, and we have we do a newsletter that comes out quarterly called Against Traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to highlight what's happening in the area. I know out in Puslinch, everyone, oh, no, it doesn't happen here. Well, you know.
It's because people, like a lot of crimes, you have an idea in your head of what that looks like maybe a Hollywood interpretation of it or something, and you don't think of like, you know, like people working at a restaurant that are actually being human trafficked, or people like if you can imagine like a work environment, like there's someone who could be maliciously taking advantage of people in that environment. And that's just in like work situations. There's like in sex trafficking, and you know, the internet has sort of widened the amount of opportunities of crimes when it comes to those sorts of things for people that yeah. Well, that's interesting. Is that the working on that kind of thing, has that been heavy or like difficult?
Well, I because I used to work with women that were abused. It's the
Right.
same.
You have like a career that was
exactly.
built on doing that, so
Yeah.
I guess you're used to dealing with that.
It's still awful.
Yeah, it doesn't negate the.
Especially since when you hear from young. I mean, I interviewed somebody not so long ago who was 14 when she was trafficked. So I mean, that's when it's sort of.
Yeah, difficult to handle, but important work regardless. And yeah, thanks for taking that time to put that out there, and the time you put towards that. Terrie, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to touch on?
I would just sum up and say that covered the wide range of subjects that we have covered today just sort of shows that when you join an organization, you never know what you're going to end up working on, but something arises and you think somebody's got to do something about this, and I can make a difference, I can be a part of this. And I encourage everybody to go out and be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great place for us to end. And I like how the way you said that, in terms of like, it's almost like you don't choose the things that pull you in, like they kind of choose you, right? Like you get grabbed by something and you say like, I can't help but be compelled to put my time towards this. So listeners, go get involved with Rotary. You'll find something that will compel you to put your time and energy towards it, it sounds like. And Terrie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.